Friends. Today we will do chapter-wise discussion of the world-famous classic novel, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Chapter 1-3, The Arrival of Mr. Bingley. The novel opens in the village of Longbourn, where the Bennet family resides. The family consists of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet and their 5 daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. Mrs. Bennet is obsessed with marrying her daughters to wealthy men to secure their futures. News arrives that a wealthy bachelor, Mr. Bingley, has rented Netherfield Park, causing great excitement. At a local ball, Bingley is amiable and takes an immediate liking to Jane, while his friend, Mr. Darcy, appears aloof and prideful. Darcy refuses to dance with Elizabeth, dismissing her as not handsome enough to tempt me, which wounds her pride and sets the stage for her prejudice against him. Chapter 4-6, Growing Attractions and Prejudices. Jane and Bingley's mutual attraction deepens, and Elizabeth observes their budding romance with happiness. However, Darcy, despite his reserved nature, begins to notice Elizabeth's sharp wit and lively personality. Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's practical friend, warns her that love is not the only consideration in marriage, foreshadowing future events. Elizabeth, however, remains firm in her belief that marriage should be based on love, not convenience. Chapter 7-12, Jane's illness and Darcy's interest. Jane visits Netherfield and falls ill, forcing her to stay there while Elizabeth comes to care for her. This situation increases Elizabeth's interactions with Darcy, who becomes increasingly captivated by her intelligence and spirit. Yet, their conversations are laced with subtle tension, as Elizabeth misinterprets Darcy's reserved demeanor as arrogance, while Darcy silently wrestles with his growing feelings. Chapter 13-18, Mr. Collins and the Meryton Ball. Mr. Collins, the Bennets' distant cousin and heir to their estate, arrives with the intention of marrying one of the daughters to keep the property in the family. He sets his sights on Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Elizabeth meets the charismatic George Wickham, who tells her that Darcy wronged him, reinforcing her negative view of Darcy. At the Meryton Ball, Darcy asks Elizabeth to dance, but her opinion of him remains clouded by Wickham's lies and Darcy's earlier slight. Chapter 19-23, Proposals and Heartbreak. Collins proposes to Elizabeth in an awkward, self-important speech, oblivious to her lack of interest. She firmly rejects him, shocking her mother but delighting her father. Shortly after, Collins hastily proposes to Charlotte Lucas, who accepts him out of practicality. Meanwhile, Bingley unexpectedly leaves for London, breaking Jane's heart. Elizabeth blames Darcy, believing he persuaded Bingley to abandon her sister. Chapter 24-27, Elizabeth's journey to Rosings. Jane goes to London to visit her aunt and uncle, hoping to see Bingley, but he avoids her. Elizabeth travels to visit Charlotte, now married to Mr. Collins, and is invited to dine at Rosings Park, the estate of Darcy's formidable aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Lady Catherine's condescending attitude irritates Elizabeth, yet she remains composed and assertive. Chapter 28-34, Darcy's first proposal. Darcy unexpectedly proposes to Elizabeth, confessing his love despite her lower social status. However, his proposal is laced with comments about the inferiority of her family, infuriating Elizabeth. She accuses him of destroying Jane's relationship with Bingley and mistreating Wickham, rejecting his hand with scathing words. Darcy leaves, wounded and humiliated. Chapter 35-37, Darcy's letter. The next day, Darcy hands Elizabeth a letter explaining his actions. He admits to discouraging Bingley's relationship with Jane, believing Jane did not genuinely love Bingley. He also reveals Wickham's true nature. Wickham attempted to elope with Darcy's sister for her fortune. Elizabeth is stunned and begins to question her own judgments and biases. Chapter 38-42, New Realizations. Elizabeth returns home, her mind troubled by Darcy's revelations. She starts to view him more sympathetically, recognizing her own prejudice and hasty misjudgments. Meanwhile, Lydia becomes increasingly reckless, flirting with officers in Meryton, foreshadowing further family turmoil. Chapter 43-46, Pemberley and Lydia's scandal. Elizabeth visits Pemberley with her aunt and uncle, and is awed by its grandeur and Darcy's housekeeper's praise of his kindness. Darcy himself appears, unexpectedly warm and courteous. Elizabeth begins to fall for him. However, their growing connection is shattered when news arrives that Lydia has run away with Wickham, threatening the family's reputation. Chapter 47-50, Darcy's secret intervention. The Bennet family is devastated by Lydia's scandal, fearing permanent social ruin. Unknown to Elizabeth, Darcy quietly tracks down Wickham and arranges their marriage, paying Wickham's debts to save the Bennet family from disgrace. Elizabeth learns of Darcy's involvement through Lydia and feels overwhelmed with gratitude and admiration. Chapter 51-55, Bingley and Jane reunite. Bingley returns to Netherfield, encouraged by Darcy, and proposes to Jane. She joyfully accepts. Darcy, however, remains distant, unsure if Elizabeth's feelings have changed. Lady Catherine de Bourgh confronts Elizabeth, demanding she promise not to marry Darcy. Elizabeth refuses, asserting her independence and further endearing herself to Darcy. Chapter 56-61, Happily Ever After. Darcy, encouraged by Elizabeth's refusal to bow to Lady Catherine's pressure, proposes again, this time humbly and without pride. Elizabeth, having shed her prejudice, accepts. They marry, as do Jane and Bingley. The novel concludes with Elizabeth and Darcy living happily at Pemberley, their relationship a testament to personal growth, understanding, and the triumph of love over social expectations. Conclusion. Pride and Prejudice masterfully explores themes of love, class, family, and self-discovery. Through Elizabeth and Darcy's evolving relationship, Austen illustrates the importance of looking beyond first impressions and learning to embrace vulnerability. The novel's enduring charm lies in its witty dialogue, dynamic characters, and the timeless message that true love flourishes when pride and prejudice are set aside.